March the 7th. A birthday shout out not to family, but to a friend today. Happy birthday, Erika. She turns from fabulous to super fabulous today. I hope you'll have many more amazing trips around the sun coming, gifting us with outpourings of your mind. And now, the business of today. One of the ways autism shows up in people is a focus on details before the whole picture is noticed. It's at least one of the reasons why many autists are so great in picking up on patterns. There's, of course, a problem when you get stuck in the details, seeing the trees but not the forest. It's a problem modern science has as well. Experts pick up on incredible minutiae exactly because they put their absolute focus on the tiny details of a subfield of physics, like electric and magnetic fields in a single cell. But the important finding will stay in their little corner, and the question of what does it mean in the complexity of a whole? How might their idea influence the work of a biochemist or a neurologist stays unanswered. I didn't just say that scientists are a bit like autists, did I? Well, it is true. Here's something amazing I noticed when I use my coping mechanism for a world that isn't made for autists, forcing myself to keep the big picture in mind. Professor Lakoff's metaphor theory and Professor Lane's ideas about how consciousness might have arisen from biochemistry work perfectly together. To recap Professor Lakoff's thoughts, we think in metaphors. It starts with primary, embodied metaphors. Embodied because they are based on things the child experiences with its body in the very early years. Hence the importance of early childhood education. Primary metaphors are things like desire is hunger. For thinking, we put these primary metaphors together like building blocks in a cascade that rolls through the brain, activating ever more neural circuitry, building the thought from the simple to the complex. What does activating neural circuitry means in its most basic? Electrical discharges. Now listen to how Professor Lane theorizes about the rise of consciousness. He's a biochemist who's been working on the origin of life for more than a decade now. In his lab, he has grown protocells. I'm not going into too much detail, but the difficulty to overcome in the process is that carbon dioxide and hydrogen will not easily react, even when there's plenty of them around. But they must react so cells can put themselves together. By tinkering with a pH level, Lane figured out an environment that catalyzes the reaction. In metaphor speak, a cell is a container that has an inside, an outside, and a border. And for a cell to start, the border of a cell is called membrane. And for a cell to start metabolizing, what this reaction of carbon dioxide and hydrogen is, what will lead to the provision of energy, this membrane needs to be electrically charged. So how does a cell now? It exists as a unit, as an entity. It acts with too much of precision not to. According to Lane, that's linked to the electrical field on the membrane. The charge on the membrane will fluctuate, of course, depending on the immediate conditions inside and outside the cell, giving real-time feedback and indicating how the cell is doing in relation to its environment. Some cells react to the change of charge by moving the membrane, changing its shape, and maybe who's moving. It will allow them to survive, where the cell staying put doesn't. Over generations, an association between the electrical phase the cell is in and what the appropriate response to it is will form. There's a reason why we have 4 billion years between the beginning of life with a single cell and something as complex as us. But in this, you can see the origins of perception. And what the cell does in a very rudimentary way, asking the binary question, am I good? is the baby's starting point as well, just on a more complex level. It asks, am I good? No, I'm hungry. And from hunger, it goes on to understand desire and so on. And it all happens through electrical fields on membranes. In a way, Wu's Lane's theory strengthened Lakoff's and vice versa. And there's something else. Lane's theory gives the cell something like perception. Perception Wu's is a biochemical algorithm, an algorithm that can be hacked. Something I've been saying from the beginning. Consciousness, however, equals perception plus data. Without the data, we will never consciously know about whatever our senses perceive. The additional data is added through Lakoff's cascades of activated neurocircuitry in the brain. To bring the conclusion in Professor Lane's own words on Lex Friedman's podcast, it seems to me that consciousness in that sense is capable of scuppering the algorithm in terms of a biochemical feedback loop. It is undoubtedly algorithmic, but in terms of what we decide it to do, it can be much more. We have control over reality, what it is and what we can imagine it to be, but only if we know ourselves, also known as thinking. Make a habit out of thinking. Turn thinking into a movement. Like, comment, share, and as always, thank you for gifting me with a few minutes of your most precious, your lifetime.